And welcome to Catholics Coast to Coast, where we love to hang out just to catch up on the week and get deeper into our faith, especially when it comes to hanging out at Podcast Central, because additional conversations help us throughout the week as we get closer to God. And in doing so, you find out about some great conversations that you can share with your friends and maybe even subscribe wherever you stream so you don't miss future episodes. I am Ace McKay, so glad to be back. And as we dive in this week, we want to check in with Adventures in Imperfect Living, because as we live in a world where we're expected to know everything, news, opinions, controversies, updates, often in real time, but knowing more doesn't always bring peace. In fact, it can leave a lot of us anxious, distracted, and spiritually exhausted. So we're going to find out some help today as the Rosary can bring us that inner peace as we check in with Adventures in Imperfect Living on this week's Catholics Coast to Coast.
All the things that are going on in the world, one of the things that I kind of envy you on is that you don't pay much attention to news. And, you know, just yesterday at therapy, my session was we talked a lot about why I might subconsciously have this need to retain all the memories and wisdom and all the things that I've learned over the years, all the facts that I know. Like, you know, my therapist even threw out, he just said, Michael Keaton Batman. And I said, that was June 1989. And, you know, it's third week of June it came out. You know, it's like, I know, right? And why is it that I'm able to retain these kinds of bits of knowledge? And then we get into the internet age and constant information and constant influx of stuff and, you know, trying to retain all this stuff and be aware of what's happening and to know the spoilers before the thing comes out and to know the news before any. And what I really want us to talk about a little bit is how detrimental that is becoming for many people in the world, not from any sociographical thing that we could plot out and show you. Here are the facts of it. A lot of it's observational and from our conversations and relationships with other people. You weren't even aware, and as we're recording this, you know, we're in the last week of January. This will go live probably on February 1st, 2026. It's been an enormously busy month for us, and we've been trying to track all the things that we're doing, which has in some ways helped, I think, both of us to not get overly concerned about what's happening in the news. And right now, the big news story for the past month has been ICE in Minneapolis and protests in Minneapolis and other places. And we don't get into political things on the show. We have in the past. We always regret it. We never feel genuine when we do it because we don't, you know, we might have opinions here in the house, but we don't get into those conversations, you know. And I think part of it is that we've realized the detrimental impact of when politics becomes our primary focus in life, when it's all about what people are doing in Washington rather than what we're doing in our own house, when it's all about the people that are screaming on social media from Minneapolis rather than what's happening in our own living rooms or our bedrooms or, you know, in our homes. And you know, I've had a couple conversations recently with people that are just so concerned about the state of the world and the state of our nation and the state of this and the state of that. And you know, I try to disengage from those conversations because I have such a hard time holding on to my own peace in general, that to bring on all this other the absolute fire hose amount of information that's coming at us, and you just oftentimes don't know who to trust. You know, there's both sides trying to see who can scream the loudest. It's easy for video footage to be manipulated. We're not seeing all perspectives, and yet we're all being told that we have to have an opinion now, instant opinions, and I call rubbish on it. And you know, I'm speaking from someone who does stay very aware of things. And one of the things that, you know, my therapist and I were talking about, why is it that I feel the need to, you know, why do I hold on to so many memories? Why do I hold on to so many Why is my brain, I don't do it intentionally, right? It's like I'm like a keeper of knowledge. And it's because it's a way of protecting myself. If I know things, then I can prevent things from happening again. If I know the things that went downward in the past, I can put up blockades and prevent those kinds of things from happening again. And I think that we've all been trained to do that over the last 25, 30 years with the internet. We have so much information. We have so many things. It's like, look, this happened, and look, this happened. And one thing happens. I mean, it literally just happened this morning. I looked at a local community Facebook thing, local, right? And we've been having an issue with a building that's being, possibly put up near us that's going to, cause a lot of disruptions. And so there's a lot of people, and we've even gone to a county commissioners meeting with the people in our neighborhood to say, please don't do this. Well, the person who's in charge of it on Facebook just this morning posted a photo of a new thing to get worked up about, and a second photo from where she protested against this same thing in 2019. So now it's just sort of like all of this data is being kept of like, oh, you say that now, but look, you said this then. And, oh, you're doing this now, but you did this then. And there's all this ammunition against everybody. And we're just loading up ammo and pointing it. Okay, so where am I going with this? I had a conversation with someone the other day who was really concerned about the way things have gone in our government and who's in charge and a lot of other things. And, I have learned over the years, it's sort of like taking the Kenny Rogers gambler approach, know when to hold them, know when to fold them, know when to walk away, know when to run, when to show your cards and when to keep your cards close when it comes to sharing the gospel of Jesus Christ. I have in the past been so overt with it that I know that I almost made it laughable to people, and then they ran away because they're like, this guy's a Jesus freak, right? And some people say, well, I'd rather be considered a Jesus freak than well, but I also look at it as I also know that the best impact I've had on people in their faith life is when I've taken the long road of years. So that tends to be my approach. I also tend to take the approach of we're in a unique position of creating media that people know that we're creating it, and at any given point, someone might just go, oh, hey, there's Greg and Jennifer, and they watch it, and they can get it from us this way. And they know that they can always come talk to us next time they see some person if they want. Is that the most effective way? I don't know, but this seems to be the way that God has given us to promote the faith. Okay, I'm going to pause. I'm going somewhere with this, but I want to get your initial input on everything I just said, on where you might think I'm going to, because you really don't know.
No, I don't. I will make a comment on the pursuit of eternal knowledge that the internet seems to represent, because I have long held this opinion, and I want to say that it was maybe 10 years ago that I started to sort of make this observation that I kind of subconsciously, I think, live by. And I just go, I know I've mentioned it on the show in the past. I go right to the Garden of Eden. And I think about that tree that Adam and Eve were warned not to go because they were not created for that tree to be in their existence at that moment. The tree of knowledge of good and evil. And I really kind of just lingered on the leading word of that tree's whole description was knowledge, and that they were not meant to have that knowledge, right? Because God knew who Adam and Eve was. Is like, this isn't for you. This is not why I created you, to have this knowledge. So obviously the snake, we all know the story, right? Satan comes up there and says, okay, but are you sure God actually meant that? Did he mean he just wanted to plant doubt? Like, he just knows that you'll be like him if you have this knowledge. So it's actually for your good. You'll be better, all the things. And then Eve's like, oh, you're right. It is good. This knowledge is good. I want it. Boom, boom. And we all know what happens next, right? The fall of humankind because they were pursuing knowledge that looked good. And so I'm thinking, what does that remind me of? Kind of reminds me of the internet. It all good knowledge, but I don't think I was meant to hold on to that. It doesn't seem to go in alignment with God saying, but I want you to know me. I am the thing that you should be pursuing, not all that knowledge over there. It's all, good, and there's good parts and bad parts, but I created you to know me. Just know me. That's the knowledge that I want you to be constantly searching for is me. And so I sort of kind of on my own decided to withdraw from constant internet. I just like, you know what? I don't want, it just became like unappealing to me.
But it seemed really easy for you to do that too. You didn't seem to, I mean, there are some people that genuinely have, I won't say an addiction, but there is a compulsion.
I can't speak about all the other personality types and all their things. I can only speak to what informed my decision.
But I guess let me make my statement in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
Let me ask you a question that might be able to help someone else.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any recollection of what you did to be able to pull away and detox, or was it cold turkey for you?
It was a little bit of a cold turkey, but it's not a perfect situation. It's kind of like what helped you realize this is my last cigarette. And you had an awareness that was ultimately powerful for you to go like, that is the last one.
But I haven't had a cigarette going on 31 years and I still think about them.
Okay, that's fine. But you still don't actually fulfill and you don't take that thought all the way to the act, right?
Yeah.
So that's okay. And so this awareness was like, oh, at some point you just realized that thing that you were doing that you thought was good is now bad. It's kind of like the contraception, birth control awareness, like, oh, it is bad. You know what? Okay. I don't need to do that anymore. And if I do, it's going to come with consequences.
Okay.
I need to be aware of that. If I do dabble, if I do try to go into the torrent, this violent stream of knowledge, I'm going to pay a price of a type. So
I think you just made a major point. I mean, I heard an aha in what you just said. Like,
okay.
and I can imagine someone watching or listening right now go, okay, wait a minute. Because I want to back up and hone in on what you just said. That, that correlation you made to contraception and that, as say you're a Catholic and you were a contraceptive couple, which is what our story was early on in our marriage. When we started learning about the beautiful teachings of openness to life and how God becomes so much a part of your life in the sexual act when you make the act 100% open to God being in that act. And with contraception, you cannot say I'm 100% open to God in this moment if you're putting up a block between you and God and what God might want to do in the marriage, right? And when we started to read that kind of thing, that was an aha, and then that gave us a desire for the good, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think so I think the correlation there is, okay, well then let's talk about the glut of news. I think that there should be a desire for the good of the peace that you can have by separating from the things that you ultimately have no control over. We do have control in so much as we can write letters to our politicians, but even that, I don't think it does much. Mm-hmm. We have more when it comes to a voting an election year. But like right now, when we're not even in a major election period, I don't think stirring the pot is doing anything other than stirring the pot. I don't think shouting out into the world is doing anything but shouting out into the world. We are not working towards any sort of peace by the amount of information that we're taking in by what's happening. I'm using the Minnesota thing as an example. By watching, and I'm guilty of this, watching a 45-minute long video about, fraud that's happening. Well, we can get upset about that. I mean, it's not an all or nothing. I want to be really careful, right? It's like I have a high level of information about the fraud. Do you even know about the fraud in Minneapolis?
I don't need to know.
Okay.
Don't need to know right now.
Okay, so if you're watching think about the correlation here right now. I mean, even look at it, right? If you watch the show on a regular basis, who's the one who is typically a little more revved up and anxious? And then who's the one who's a little bit more peaceful? Do you want to be more like Greg or more like Jennifer? I mean,
Oh, okay.
I'm just saying, like in this moment right now, right? You don't get revved up about things in the world. You're not occupying your and is the world are you at fault, Jennifer, for the collapse of the world because you're not paying attention to what's happening in Minneapolis? The things in Minneapolis, I mean, some people would say this. The things in Minneapolis are happening because you are ignorant and you are being blatantly ignorant.
So that is the argument.
It is an argument. It's a major argument.
An argument.
Yeah.
It is a tactic of arguing, but is it true? And if you just stop and look at those words, do I have that kind of power to affect those realities out of state?
And is it your responsibility to say, you know what? I'm now going to spend my life and repivot the things I'm focusing on so that I can make an impact in Minneapolis right now.
And what is the best way a Catholic can make an impact?
Now, so you're getting to where I'm going with this. This is and here's why. Before we asked, I asked you if you had your rosary with you. I'm not going to.
Well, I have it built in my fingers.
Well, I don't want to. We're not going to pray the rosary right now.
Mm-hmm.
But what as we've had a very busy start to this year, we've done a lot of things already, and I'm kind of freaked out that January's already over. This might be the first January I can remember in years where I was like, I'm not ready for January to be over because I still have a lot that I wanted to get done this month. One of the goals for Rosary Army, make them, pray them, give them away. We changed some of the verbiage on the website a few years ago. Have more peace by praying the rosary. If we can start pivoting our focus to where our goal is truly peace with us, individual peace, then that peace will have a lot more power in the lives of those around us, because that's a lot more attractive than being angry, than being constantly embedded in the political. I can't imagine. I mean, this is maybe this is just me personally. When I see someone screaming and yelling and swearing online, my first thought is not, man, I would love to go hang out with that person. I bet I would have a great time with that person. My first thought is, I'm not going anywhere near that person. I don't have the capacity for that level of stress. But that's what the devil's trying to tell us all that we have to be going to. Whereas our Blessed Mother, Queen of Peace, she's the mother of the Prince of Peace, is telling us to meditate on the life of the Prince of Peace. And that's honestly the most powerful thing that we could be doing right now. I think that praying the rosary, certainly, if we could all be praying our daily rosary and offer it up for peace in the world, I don't offer that up. I don't offer that prayer at the end of my rosary, but I need to.
Well, and part of, I think, why people think that getting riled up and making the stand to fight publicly is a form of justice in their minds. Like, they see this as like, the revolutionaries of old. Like, if, you can change the world if you believe that if you stand up and you fight, and there's some truth to that, of like taking a stand is not like bad and wrong all the time, but you just have to know what is it that you're trying to achieve? What is the reason? What is the intent? But so I think a lot of these activists believe that peace just doesn't work. You have to fight.
Yes.
That is you can tell that that's what's under their hood, and that's part of their motivation. They're tired. They think peace is doing nothing. Being still is doing nothing. It doesn't work.
We watched that the silly episode of Community the other day where they're having the fight between Pillow Town and Blanketsburg, and Jeff Winger, the main character, he's just trying to incite people into violence. But even though he doesn't really care, he just knows he can incite them. And he's yelling. He goes, "We fight so that we may have peace." And it's just like, it just doesn't make sense.
Right. And if you think about what we hear in Mass, like, peace be with you. Okay. Like, Christ is giving us a big clue. Peace be with you. Not let anxiety and anger be with you, but peace. Let peace be with you. And let there be no anxiety about you. So right away, Christ is telling you what he thinks about anxiety and what he thinks about peace. And it's very clear. If you are feeling anxious, that's already an indicator that something is wrong and that you need to get out of that state and move toward peace as quickly as possible in the best way that you can. It is an indicator that you have to get away from that state of being. Anxiousness is not the right place. It is the wrong place.
Okay,
You
so
have to get out of it.
before we started, I made a comment to you. You know, I didn't really tell you what we were going to talk about, but I gave a little bit of a coaching scenario, and I said, let's remember. You need coffee?
Yes.
I said, let's remember. Well, speaking of coffee, imagine while we're recording, think about a person that we, maybe a person that you care about, maybe one of our kids, maybe someone that we know, or maybe a listener that we've, traded emails with, and think about that person and really try to talk to that person versus, putting on a show. Because one of the things that I would love to accomplish this year is for the work that we're doing. While it's important for us to talk about topics and talk about particular aspects of the faith, there's a lot of podcasts and a lot of Catholic podcasts, audio and video, that are doing a lot of great things. But what I want to do is encourage people to really get into that daily prayer. But I'm very aware of how much stumbling happens as someone is trying to get into that routine and how discouraging it can be. It's like, well, okay, you know what? I heard Greg and Jennifer talking about all that stuff. I'm going to try to step away from the news. And then they said something about praying a rosary. And, I'm going to try to say a rosary every day this week. And then they don't, right? And I want us to be a weekly encouragement for people that by the end of this year, if everyone who's watching our podcast is taking steps to make a daily rosary a part of their faith practice, then I think we're going to, have a lot more impact on the world by that action than encouraging people to get worked up about politics. And where I'm going with this is like, I want, and I don't know quite how to do it. I mean, I'm trying to work it out right now as we're talking, right? And these are the kind of conversations you and I always are having of like, what is it that we can do to really impact people's prayer life and people's faith life? And I firmly believe that the rosary is a gateway to a deeper relationship with Jesus Christ through all of the other sacraments and aspects of the Catholic Church. And so when I'm talking about trying to encourage people to pray the rosary more, I think people need to know how to do it. I think, the people that do know how to do it need help on knowing how to do it every day. And then the people who are doing it every day need help on making it more efficacious and more beneficial. Go ahead.
The other night I offered to pray my daily rosary with our son, Ben, he recently returned home. He's here living with us, and he is so easygoing on this point. He's like, yeah, sure, I'll pray my rosary with you, because he also has made a commitment to make a daily rosary himself. And so we all kind of know in this family, we're all going to be praying a rosary at some point in this 24-hour period. And so sometimes we sync up and pray together, or sometimes we just do it individually, depending on the day. So last night, Ben and I were praying, and it's funny when it's the two of us in particular, I like to give him the opportunity to be the leader of this rosary, and then I'll take on the responses. One, because I think it's...
This wasn't last night. This was 2 nights ago.
Yeah, 2 nights ago. It's befitting more to, I think, a young man to exercise his skill set in just being a leader spiritually. And so this is a great way to just very slowly introduce that opportunity for the young man in your life. And so I thought, you lead, and so I'll follow. And so, fine, he's no problem. He's leading. And then all of a sudden he stops. And he goes, can I ask you a question? Like, maybe we got a decade before now we were stopping and having a conversation. But I'm like, that's fine. We can do that. This is a family rosary. We can have a pause. I just hope it's on topic. I don't know if he's about to leave the rosary entirely and talk about a thing that was in his brain.
Do you own your own pair of calipers?
Yeah. It could have happened that way. Thankfully, in this moment, it wasn't a derailing of the rosary prayer. It was on topic. It says, he asked me, what do you think about? Like, what are you thinking about right now during the rosary? And so that revealed to me that this was an area that he probably needs a lot of help in, is controlling the wildness of the directions of his thoughts in his brain while his mouth is just saying the rote prayers. And this is a very real thing for people who have prayed the rosary almost daily. It becomes a new challenge, is that you go into an autopilot mode and then your brain just loses the connection to the words and you start drifting with whatever you're thinking about, whatever you want to do, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And you got to come back. So he's like, what do you think about? So I told him, I said, well, right now, we're on the first mystery of this joyful mystery. So I'm thinking about, I try to put myself in the scene. I try to build the scene in my mind like a movie. Like, okay, if it's the Annunciation, I try to imagine young Mary in a dwelling and my vision of what I think an angel could possibly look like being right in front of her, and then trying to see that, try to see the angel and try to feel the humility of Mary in that moment and try to match it and try to respond like, how can this be that I'm going to get to do this thing for really me? It's me. And just have a awe and wonder of that moment and just try to stay in it and try to hold on to that as much as you can. Because you got 10 Hail Marys before you're going to move on to another scene. And so sometimes I stay in it. Sometimes I drift out. But the moment I do find myself in the grocery store suddenly in my thoughts, I just leave the grocery store of my thoughts and go right back to the room where Mary was. And it's just this constant back and forth. And then eventually over time, you stay longer in the right headspace. And if for some reason, I also added, if I maybe am struggling with seeing the mystery scene in my mind and I'm not able to build it up or insert myself into the memory, because it's a memory that I have to construct in my mind, I'll also allow myself to linger on the words of the Hail Mary so that they don't come too quickly out of my mouth. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou, like I love you, goodbye. What's that? What is that? You got to slow down. You must slow down with these words. Every 2 or 3 words means something. Hail Mary, stop. Let me just think about that for a second.
Luke 2, right? Go read the scripture.
Full of grace. What does that mean? Okay, she's full of it. What does that mean? Okay, it's a mystery. Like, wow. Hail Mary, full of grace. The Lord is with you. The Lord is with you, period. Like it's a statement of fact. It's not like a suppose preposition, like if maybe, because no, it is. It is. And so if you slow down a little bit, you can kind of like linger with the beauty of the meaning of the words of the Hail Mary. And then you got the mystery. And then it's like suddenly the mystery is a more engaging act. I mean, the whole rosary prayer becomes a more engagement situation. And so I just imparted that to him so that he can begin earning that and doing that in his own way, according to his temperament. But his mind is far more shaped by the internet than mine is and was or whatever. He is a child, and most 20-something-year-olds, this is their whole childhood has been inundated with the internet in a way that Greg and I in our 50s have never had to contend with. We never had that volume of knowledge and facts pouring into our brain's development before the age of 26. Their brains are literally being wired this way. Ours wasn't. Thank the Lord it wasn't. But they can learn. They just have to be taught by someone else. They have to be taught how to meditate. They have to be taught how to be still. They have to be taught how to be quiet.
Why the Rosary helps restore inner peace. Great advice and insights from Adventures in Imperfect Living. You want more on this episode or ones you might have missed? Check us out, Podcast Central at EWTN.com/podcast or wherever you like to stream. Just subscribe to Adventures in Imperfect Living so you catch future episodes. I'm Ace McKay. When Catholics Coast to Coast returns, in the immortal words of Moira Rose, played by the late Catherine O'Hara, gossip is the devil's telephone. Best to just hang up. This week, Dr. Scott Hahn is helping us to learn how to tame our tongue on the road to Emmaus, and we'll check in with Dr. Scott Hahn coming up after the break, right here on Catholics Coast to Coast.
The destination for great Catholic audio programming is EWTN Podcast Central, featuring the best of EWTN radio, as well as faith-filled podcasts from our friends and affiliates across the nation, all in one place, all free. If it's central to the faith, you can find it on EWTN Podcast Central. It's like podcast heaven. Visit EWTN.com/radio/podcasts today.
Hi, I'm Dr. Scott Hahn, and I want to welcome you to The Road to Emmaus, a podcast here from the St. Paul Center. And I am so blessed to be with Father Gregory Pine for our conversation about his brand new book, Training the Tongue and Growing Beyond Sins of Speech. Welcome, Father Gregory.
Thanks for having me.
Can I give you a brief introduction so people who don't know you can find out a little background?
With pleasure.
Okay, so Father Gregory Pine is a Dominican friar of the province of St. Joseph, professor of dogmatic theology at the Dominican House of Studies in Washington, D.C. You received your doctorate in dogmatic theology at the University of Freiburg in Switzerland, and you have served previously as the assistant director for campus outreach at the Thomistic Institute. You are the author of a number of books: Your Eucharistic Identity, recently, co-author of Marian Consecration with Aquinas and Credo, an RCIA program, the author of Prudence, Choose Confidently, Live Boldly, OSV, and you are also a regular contributor to the podcast Godsplaining, the Thomistic Institute, Pints with Aquinas, and Catholic Classics, and today, Road to Emmaus.
That's right, yep.
So I want to thank you for writing a book for us here at the Emmaus Road publication, but I also want to thank you for writing a book for me as a teacher.
Yeah.
You begin the book with a quotation from James chapter 3. And tell us why it was you selected that particular passage from James 3, verses 1 to 13, before I read it.
Sure, yeah. In short, because that particular passage tells forth the power of the tongue. And sometimes we're inclined to think about the way in which the tongue can be a hindrance or even an obstacle to our growth in holiness, because we say things that we wish we didn't say. But I think the ambivalence of the language, the tongue is a fire, the tongue is a rudder, the tongue gives growth, the tongue is a kind of wellspring. It gives indication that it's powerful, yes, but provided we train it well, it can be powerful unto the praise of God and the salvation of souls. So that was the hope.
All right, so I want to read it, but I want to brace myself because it is an ominous warning to men like me, teachers. Let not many of you become teachers, my brethren, for you know that we who teach shall be judged with greater strictness. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's a healthy reminder. You know that line, physician, heal thyself, teacher, teach thyself.
Yep.
So for we all make many mistakes, and if anyone makes no mistakes in what he says, he is a perfect man, able to bridle the whole body also. If we put bits into the mouths of horses, that they may obey us, we guide their whole bodies. Look at the ships also. Though they are so great and are driven by strong winds, they are guided by a very small rudder, wherever the will of the pilot directs. So the tongue is a little member and boasts of great things. How great a forest is set ablaze by a small fire. And the tongue is a fire. The tongue is an unrighteous world among our members, staining the whole body, setting on fire the cycle of nature, and set on fire by hell, Gehenna. I'm not sure I want to go on, but let's finish. For every kind of beast and bird, of reptile and sea creature can be tamed and has been tamed by mankind, but no human being can tame the tongue, a restless evil full of deadly poison. With it we bless the Lord and Father, and with it we curse men who are made in the likeness of God. From the same mouth come blessing and cursing. My brethren, this ought not to be so. Does a spring pour forth from the same opening fresh water and brackish? Can a fig tree, my brethren, yield olives, or a grapevine figs? No more can salt water yield fresh. Who is wise and understanding among you? By his good life, let him show his works in the meekness of wisdom. The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
You know, everybody associates the book of James with it's like Christian wisdom literature. And when you go back to the Old Testament and read Proverbs, or other books in the wisdom tradition, you often find things that are bracing, but nothing quite like this. I mean, this is wisdom literature bordering on the apocalyptic, because you not only have wisdom imparted, but you also have judgment that is guaranteed. You also have an accurate assessment of the damage that is done by the human tongue. And so, the idea of taming the tongue is the image that James uses, but you call your book Training the Tongue.
Yeah.
So this goes beyond warning. This really is a kind of pedagogy for us. The book is small, less than 200 pages. I love the cover. And I know we worked with you, but we really got a sense of your own approbation.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah. Training the Tongue and Growing Beyond Sins of Speech, divided up into 7 chapters. Near the end, you have a chapter that is especially helpful for people like me, teachers, on teaching and instruction. But generally speaking, you integrate Scripture and St. Thomas, along with a lot of other sources. But I mean, this has become sort of your own trademark or DNA, as it were. Tell us about why you wrote the book and what you hope people get out of it.
Yeah, I think my hope is that I would like people to know not only that God knows them and loves them, but that they can know and love God, which is to say, I'd like for people to have the resources to respond generously to God's knowledge and love of them with something of the same. And I think that sometimes we're kept back in our Christian vocations for fear that whatever we do kind of comes to nothing. And seen from one perspective, that's true.
Yeah.
St. Thomas has pretty modest estimations of what man can do apart from God's grace. But I think that, considering the fact that God has seen fit to bestow upon us a share in his divine life, we are called to great things. And I think that we can have magnanimous designs for future endeavors. And so when we focus exclusively on trying to root sin out of our life, it can feel like, a kind of fruitless task. Because truth be told, when you're not cultivating, when you're not planting, when you're not tilling the soil, there is no fruit.
Right.
You just end up with an empty garden. And so I thought that we could put the emphasis squarely on that cultivation, that growth, the good works that God wants to accomplish in and through us, not just as a proxy, because he doesn't need proxies. He can do whatever he wants, and he can do it directly without mediation, but really as an expression of his generosity, as the outworking of his grace. Because it's then that we get an insight into how much he loves us. He doesn't just want us to be passive recipients. He wants us to be active agents in the dispensation of salvation, which is wild.
When you think about God who is truth and how he spoke the word for the world to come into being out of nothing, and then he delivers that word on Sinai, and we find that word in Scripture, the inspired word. But the word incarnate, this is not simply a backup, this is really not only what was decreed from the beginning, but Jesus was not waiting, backstage in order to become actively engaged in history. He was there in the beginning. He was the Word. And so what we need to recognize is that, by becoming incarnate, dying, rising, and returning to the Father, he doesn't get anything that he was lacking. So he dignifies us, not only with language and with reason, but also with something that takes us beyond the merely creaturely or servile nature that we have, as exalted as it is in contrast to the animals. Nevertheless, we are called to become children of God. And when you think about, the metaphysical challenge of becoming a child of God, God alone can do it. But he chooses to do it in a way that really points to a condescension, where he not only endows our speech with his own truth and his own love, but he endows us with a capacity to tell the truth. And you want to train us to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth. Yeah. And the grace of God, so help us God, is something that is super essential. It's not like an option that you might add to the car you're purchasing, or no way. It is essential. So let's begin with chapter 1, where you speak of telling the truth. Yeah. Why is that so important?
The basic insight or the basic observation of the chapter is that apart from the truth, we can't really build a life together. I think that, in effect, that's the point of our life, is to be together.
Right.
Not in like trivial ways or in banal ways, but in real rich ways. And on account of the fact, like you observed, that we have been set apart from the beasts, or we've been elevated beyond the beasts, we have a capacity to be together, which isn't just like local or isn't just bodily. It's transcendent. It's spiritual, as it were. So like we can think the same thoughts and experience the same affections, not just with each other, but also with God. And I realize that kind of stretches language and even stretches concepts. But the fact of the matter is that God wants us to come together with him by thinking his thoughts and by experiencing his affections. And so the idea is that, all right, if we're going to do that, then we need to be straightforward about it. Because if we attempt to deceive ourselves or to deceive others, then we undermine that project, because we attempt to build our lives on something other than solid rock, on the shifting sand of deceit and deception. So obviously a confrontation with the truth can be difficult. Like you come to a recognition at a certain point in your life that you're not the most talented, or you're not the most handsome, or you're not the most gifted athlete, or you're not whatever, like whatever it is that one has to grapple with. But then you have to confront the subsequent revelation. Well, God loves me. God loves me in this life, not in another life that could have been, but in this life that is. And what am I going to do about that? And so I think that we have to cultivate a habit of, one, like opening our minds and hearts to the proclamation of the truth, and then two, recounting the facts in truthful fashion if we really want to come together with each other and with God.
Yeah. And so the truth about ourselves, our dignity, and yet at the same time, our weakness, our pride, our insecurity, the tendency you point out to compare ourselves to other people. We're not the most handsome, we're not the most intelligent or whatever. And yet we're made for God. We're made for each other. And so, in chapter 2, you begin to speak about community and the importance of the truth for building community, fostering good conversation. Yeah. What are you about in that chapter?
Yeah. So the word conversation as we use it nowadays typically just means chit chat, or a verbal back and forth. But conversation in the classic sense means sharing of life. So I think about in the third part of the Summa, when St. Thomas Aquinas talks about the way in which our Lord lived, namely that he shared his life with the apostles, and he encountered some poverty, or he experienced some poverty, but not acute poverty. And like, why did he choose to live as he chose to live? He uses the word conversation on the conversation of the life of Christ. So it's kind of like our way of being. And as human beings, we're built for conversation, which is to say we're built for being with each other, and specifically being with each other in spoken and in heard ways, or listened to ways. Because, again, we can share our bodily lives to a certain extent, but when we have this spiritual element, consciously cultivated and, please God, perfected, then we can be with each other in really, really rich ways. And so the point of the chapter is just to think about the fact that, all right, it seems that God intends us to exchange the word, or it seems that God intends us to progress together to a common understanding and like a common sharing by way of the words that we formulate, the phrases that we choose, the way in which we enter into conversation. And so just kind of make some simple observations about the way in which we can derail that by the words that I use are indelicacy and imbalance. Where it becomes not so much a matter of, let's think the same thoughts, let's experience the same affections. It becomes more so a matter of, okay, this guy's talked 65% of the time, which only leaves me 35% of the time. And, that makes me feel a little raw, or that makes me feel left out in the cold. When we make these kind of comparisons or enter into these competitions, it undoes us, right? And we don't actually get to the point of human communion. The purpose of that chapter is just to think about how we enter into conversation in not just pleasant ways, but in richly meaningful and purposeful ways.
How would you illustrate indelicacy or imbalance?
So one example from the book is, like, for instance, I think that small talk is a completely appropriate mode of human communication. And sometimes, it depends on the culture. Some cultures are more discreet and some cultures are more transparent. But depending upon the culture, there's usually a standard as to how much you would share with a person, depending upon the degree of familiarity that you have at present. And if someone were to be kind of transgressive and say, like, forget about small talk, like, what are you really thinking right now? Or, tell me your deepest, darkest secret. That actually would frustrate communion because it would presume an intimacy which doesn't exist at present. And it would cause the other individual to retreat a little bit. Whereas if you go through the kind of requisite small talk, you're at ease, and then you feel a kind of space open up in the conversation to share in a more personal way. So it's like it takes account of the fact that we as human beings live in time, and our friendships take shape in time. And so there's a kind of process of development. So that's just like one, but indelicacy can take various forms. Sometimes people talk about things that you probably shouldn't talk about in polite company, or they use words which are inordinately crass for the shock value or even just the sonic delight. So it's just to kind of acknowledge that there are various ways in which, like we reveal, but we also conceal, not for fear or shame, but in recognition that a human person is a kind of, complex type of creature, and that we should reverence, or that we should honor the complexity of that creature and approach him or her in the way that's kind of called for in the circumstances.
Good. And imbalance then?
Imbalance, just various ways in which we find ourselves in competition or seeking a kind of domination in exchanges of that sort. So like, I like to put emphasis on the fact that listening it can be generative, and I use that word in somewhat strange fashion, but like listening can actually help a person flourish. Like when you listen well, everyone knows the difference between a conversation where there are telephones or like cell phones involved and when there are cell phones not involved. Right. Like as long as the cell phone is present, I don't have any real confidence that my interlocutor cares, like what I'm saying. He's saying the requisite things, he's asking the requisite questions, but does he actually care? But when somebody listens well, it's nurturing. Maybe you might think in vanity, oh, wow, this person really cares about me, I must be important. But I think most of us mature beyond that and just say like, wow, this is really tender, this is really precious. So I think like a lot of times we care too terribly much about how many words each individual has spoken or how much of the airtime has been dominated in this, that, or the other way. Whereas I think the focus should be really on kind of like calling forth the other person, like making an invitation for the other person to enter the conversation in a way that's more richly humanizing. I think of the way that St. Teresa Benedicta of the Cross talks about the vocation of a woman. She says that women have a kind of privileged access to the interior life. Not to say that men don't, but specifically mothers always know what's going on with their kids. They have a knack for it. And sometimes in fallen circumstances, they can use that knack in fell ways, and they can kind of manipulate and control and constantly take temperatures in a way that causes their children horror and the desire to flee. But in a redeemed setting, women can use that as a way by which to kind of call forth the nobility which might otherwise lie dormant. So I think that like what we're looking for in a conversation, the balance that we're looking for isn't so much like I speak 50%, you speak 50%. It's that we're attending to each other in our humanity, and that we're proffering an invitation so that both persons can come together in real ways, not like trivial ways or banal ways.
Your analysis is so practical that it's sort of unexpected that it ends up also being rather penetrating. Because I think most people approach speech, conversation, chit-chat, small talk, whatever, with this pragmatic attitude that is, actions speak louder than words. So words matter, but not that much. And who would disagree with actions speak louder than words? But, in the last 50, maybe 70 years or so, a growing awareness among academics and scholars, I suppose, is that there are things that are known as speech acts, that you can do things with words, to draw from, Austin's work, how to do things with words. And so you need to get beyond chit-chat, small talk, but you also need to not transgress the boundaries, where you're concealing and revealing. And in this way, we're also not only fostering community, but we're imaging God. God acts, but he's not physical until the incarnation. And yet it is by the word of God that all things come to be. And so you can trace the idea of speech acts, not simply I do before an altar and witnesses, or you're fired. Those are doing things with words, but let there be light. You also talk about the danger of words, So it's one thing to foster good conversation to build community, but you also talk about how we speak about others. And this involves insult, gossip, slander, and other transgressive actions of speech. Discuss that.
Sure, yeah. So I think, people talk in the 21st century about co-responsibility. We can just make simple observations that we're made for life in community, but that life in community can be somewhat fragile. Yeah. It can be somewhat volatile because it requires of us a certain patience and perseverance with the other. Like, we're not always at our best. We find it difficult to notice good things, probably a little easier to notice bad things. And as a result of what, we can tend to be critical, we can tend to be skeptical, we can tend to be even brutal at times. And so, there are the various temptations, and we list, like the sins of speech which crop up. Like, sometimes you insult a person directly to his face or her face. Sometimes you talk about a person behind, the individual's back. So that'd be more like what we call detraction or slander or calumny, depending on whether it's true or false. Sometimes, though, we're even more insidious in that we work against each other's relationships. It's not just a matter of reputation now, it's a matter of connections. Mm-hmm. Or we work against another person's kind of seriousness or dignity. Like we can mock each other and deride each other in ways that are super destructive. Often enough, we talk about gossip. Gossip is probably the word that comes up the most often. I think about gossip as just a kind of idle speech about another, which revels in the opportunity to be in the know on the inner circle or whatever it is, and which will use another person's life or reputation just kind of as fodder for that type of social leveraging. And so I think that often what we discern in those various sins of speech is like a relationship or an interaction that is broken down, that has been wounded, or that has been kind of hollowed out for whatsoever reason. And, you can see individuals in those circumstances just kind of like they're hurt and then they're looking to push back, whether by hurting another individual, right, or by justifying their hurt in some way, shape, or form, or trying to equal the social balance by making it known that the reason why they're not ahead or the reason why they're not in a place of prominence is because they've been held back or whatever it is. There are various motivations. But I think there's a kind of fear that our sociality, or that our, I don't know what you would call it, but like the fact that we have this nature which is broken open to relationship and interaction is actually a weakness. It's a source of vulnerability which we would prefer not to experience. And I think that this is just the promise of speech that safeguards the dignity and honors the excellence and, upholds the reputation and, works towards the preservation of the friendships of the other, is really that's just part of the outworking of the redemption. Because I think we'll only really come together in meaningful and purposeful ways when we can trust each other. But I think that our trust of each other is premised upon our trust of God. We can do certain things unaided by grace. St. Thomas says, we can build roads and plant vineyards. But the things that matter most, those lie entirely beyond us. And so I think it's once we've experienced something of God's healing and growth born of the grace which he, pours out so generously, then we can begin to come together in ways, not that we should wait upon that, to make our first efforts, but it's really in this kind of vertical integrity that he secures that we can establish a kind of horizontal integrity in our relationships and interactions.
Learning to Tame Our Tongues. That's great advice from Dr. Scott Hahn. This week's Road to Emmaus podcast. You want more on that episode or others before it? Well, easy to do. Just go to Podcast Central. That's at EWTN.com/podcast so you can catch up. And of course, share with your friends as we get closer to Lent. There's always a great conversation to bring us closer to God, and we're glad that you're joining in. I am bailing out. I'm Ace McKay. I'll see you next time. And remember to let God define who you are. And I'll see you with Catholics Coast to Coast.